I do not collect workplace friends. I collect immutable audit logs. System audit logs tell you precisely who authenticated into the primary data core at 2:14 in the morning, which cryptographic keys were loaded, and why an internal node tried to exfiltrate 6 terabytes of classified logistical modeling across an unauthorized gateway. That unyielding mathematical precision is my professional love language. My name is Nicholas Thorne, and for 23 years I have served as the Senior Cyber Compliance Officer for Vanguard Cyber Dynamics. If that title sounds dry to you, congratulations on having a vibrant social life. To the individuals who determine whether our enterprise survives, specifically the Department of Defense, the National Security Agency, and federal auditors, I am the immovable guardian of access integrity. Throughout my 23 years in federal defense contracting, I have learned one absolute truth. The most dangerous threat to national security is rarely a foreign threat actor operating out of a subterranean bunker. Far more often, it is an arrogant executive in a tailored suit who believes federal compliance rules are mere suggestions, or that setting his master password to admin or password 123 is acceptable because security tokens are inconvenient. It was a cold Tuesday morning in Northern Virginia. I was 4 hours into reviewing Level 5 system integrity logs, examining the compartmentalization boundaries of our primary infrastructure. Vanguard Cyber Dynamics handles advanced operational forecasting for the armed forces. We model supply chain vulnerabilities for armored divisions, predict maintenance cycles for naval strike groups, and maintain structural simulation data that keeps service members alive in contested environments. If our repositories are compromised, people die in the field. That is the fundamental reality of federal contracting. As I scrolled through access requests for Defense Node 12, an air-gapped mainframe holding our most sensitive strategic contingency models, I froze. A faint anomaly rippled through the smooth hum of incoming data telemetry. Someone was attempting to execute a remote handshake protocol against the primary security gateway. The request originated from an internal legacy account labeled System Admin 09. That discovery sent a cold pulse through my veins. Vanguard strictly prohibits generic shared administration accounts. Every system action must be biometrically tied to a cleared individual carrying verified credentials. System Admin 09 was an obsolete ghost key, a relic from an infrastructure migration 7 years ago that should have been permanently deleted and scrubbed. Seeing that ghost account pinging an air-gapped defense node was the digital equivalent of finding a stranger in your locked house at midnight, holding a master key ring. I did not panic. Panic is for amateurs who lack procedural authority. Instead, I picked up my encrypted voice-over IP phone and dialed iDirector Walter Ellison. Walter is a competent engineer, but when executive management walks into the room, his backbone softens like warm wax. "Walter," I said without pleasantries, "why is System Admin 09 active, and why is it attempting a brute force handshake with Defense Node 12? A heavy silence filled the line. "Nicholas," Walter whispered, his voice trembling, "I did not initiate that account. The authorization ticket came down directly from the executive penthouse." I dropped my voice into an icy register. "Walter, I do not care if the ticket was signed by George Washington. That account has 0 security clearance and no authorization for top-secret data. Who is physically operating that terminal?" Walter swallowed hard. "It is Julian." Julian Prescott was the 28-year-old son of Chief Executive Officer Donald Prescott. Julian carried the inflated title of Chief Innovation Officer, a position created for him 6 months prior despite his background, consisting of 2 bankrupt cryptocurrency startups and an unaccredited degree in entrepreneurial vision. Julian spent his days babbling about breaking traditional paradigms and leveraging AI synergies. Until today, I ignored him like a buzzing fly outside a window. But now the fly had a sledgehammer. "Julian possesses 0 federal security clearance, Walter," I stated, typing rapidly to isolate the local subnet. "Julian cannot pass a background check." "Why does he possess root credentials? His father demanded it," Walter admitted in misery. "Donald walked in yesterday. He said Julian needed unfettered access to build a revolutionary AI pitch deck for the upcoming Pentagon Summit. Donald said compliance protocols were stifling his son's creative genius and ordered me to reactivate the ghost key. Did you log Donald's verbal demand in the official compliance ledger, Walter? I wrote it down on a paper note. Walter stammered defensively. I hung up the phone. On my primary monitor, the ghost account stopped probing the firewall. A terrifying new line of execution code flashed across the audit screen. Executive clearance override authorized. Master passkey accepted. Access granted. Donald Prescott had utilized his personal executive master encryption card to bypass hardware air gaps entirely. Julian was now inside Defense Node 12, pulling raw binary files containing active military logistical models. I did not march up to the executive penthouse or scream at administrators. That is how amateur corporate victims behave. Instead, I activated an isolated terminal operating on an independent fiber optic link completely separated from Vanguard's corporate network. I inserted my personal federal security credential card, authenticated using an 84-character cryptographic key string, and initiated an encrypted intake report to the Special Audits Division at the National Security Agency. Title: Unapproved Access to Classified Defense Repository Priority 1. Donald and Julian had poured gasoline across the enterprise. I was simply holding the official statutory rulebook, and federal law strikes harder than a sledgehammer. The following morning, corporate headquarters vibrated with a manic energy. An emergency email invitation had been blasted to all 350 employees at 7 in the morning, complete with a graphic of a launching rocket ship. I despise corporate emails that use cartoon graphics. They are the digital signature of executive panic. We gathered in the central atrium, a soaring 4-story structure of glass and polished marble. Chief Executive Officer Donald Prescott stood atop a raised stage in a tailored suit that cost more than most junior analysts earned in 6 months. Standing beside him was his 28-year-old son, Julian, wearing designer sneakers, tight jeans, and a t-shirt that read "Disruption is Power Team." Donald's voice boomed through the speakers. For decades, Vanguard Cyberdynamics has operated under a defensive mindset. We have allowed ourselves to be shackled by compliance procedures and outdated regulatory fear. The future belongs to rapid innovators who dare to break down artificial barriers. My son, Julian Prescott, is leading Vanguard into a new era. Julian stepped up to the microphone, adjusting non-prescription glasses. Thanks, Dad. I mean Chief Executive Officer Prescott. Julian chuckled, prompting eager laughter from executive sycophants. Look, team, I spent the last 24 hours deep inside our core data architecture, and I was appalled. We have isolated data silos everywhere. Information wants to be fluid, guys. Information wants to move at the speed of thought. That slogan is an admission of criminal negligence when applied to classified military operational data. That is why today I am officially launching the Vanguard Next Gen Artificial Intelligence Initiative. Julian continued, waving toward the main projection screens. I extracted raw historical data sets from our primary forecasting mainframes. Yes, the top-secret logistics repositories, and uploaded them into a dynamic public hybrid cloud framework. We are deploying an advanced large language model that will generate real-time battlefield insights for the Pentagon during our summit tomorrow. A dense silence fell over the atrium. Senior systems engineers looked down at their shoes in horror. Julian Prescott had just openly admitted in front of 350 witnesses that he had illegally exfiltrated top-secret defense data from an air-gapped server and uploaded it to an unencrypted public cloud server hosted by a third-party startup called Neuralink Analytics. Julian turned his gaze toward the back of the atrium, locking eyes with me. A condescending smirk spread across his face. I know some of our legacy staff love their traditional firewalls, Julian said, his voice dripping with arrogance. I know our senior compliance officer, Nicholas Thorne. Where are you, Nicholas? Ah, right there. Nicholas is practically a living firewall. Nicholas believes security means locking data in a steel vault, but I believe security means velocity. Therefore, effective immediately, I am granting my innovation team unrestricted root administrative access across all corporate networks. No more compliance forms. No more waiting for Nicholas to stamp a ticket. Donald Prescott began to clap enthusiastically. That is the winning spirit. Let us capture the future. The assembly broke up into hushed chatter. Coworkers carefully avoided eye contact with me as they shuffled back to their cubicles. They recognized a professional walking corpse and assumed I was about to be buried. I walked back to my corner office, sat down at my terminal, and pulled secondary audit logs. Julian had not been exaggerating. At 3:45 that morning, Account System Admin 09 executed a bulk data extraction command, sweeping 6 terabytes of unredacted military supply chain files. Telemetry logs showed an active upload stream to an external IP address registered to Neuralink Analytics, a commercial AI startup whose security infrastructure likely consisted of a default password and a single junior technician. My hands remained steady as I recorded packet captures, took full-resolution screenshots, and saved high-definition video of Donald and Julian's public confession. I opened my encrypted connection to the National Security Agency. My primary contact, Director Howard Albright, was a veteran federal investigator who understood corporate corruption. I submitted an immediate addendum. Subject Julian Prescott has publicly confirmed exfiltration of 6 terabytes of classified logistical forecasting data to an unencrypted third-party public cloud server. Complete digital telemetry attached. The terminal screen displayed an immediate response. Intake received. Federal task force initiated. Do not intervene. Maintain standard demeanor. Standing down was difficult. Julian was strutting down hallways, high-fiving junior developers. He had no comprehension that a federal legal scope was quietly locking onto his forehead. I sat at my desk, took a slow sip of lukewarm tea, and allowed executive arrogance to mature until the federal trap was fully set. At 2 o'clock that afternoon, my desk phone chimed with the ringtone for Human Resources. Brenda Foley, Vice President of Human Capital, spoke with artificial corporate warmth. "Nicholas, could you step down to my office for a quick sec? Please bring your physical security access credentials with you." "Bring your credentials" was the corporate euphemism for "your career is finished." I stood up, adjusted my tie, and left my office exactly as it was, a clean, active workspace demonstrating interrupted duties. I walked down the corridor toward the executive suite, passing nervous developers frantically trying to integrate Julian's buggy artificial intelligence scripts. I entered Brenda's corner office. Donald Prescott stood by floor-to-ceiling windows, looking out over the parking facility with hands thrust into trouser pockets. Julian sat comfortably in a leather guest chair, scrolling through social media on his tablet. Brenda sat behind her mahogany desk, a white sheet of paper resting in front of her. "Take a seat." "Nicholas." Brenda said I remained standing. "I prefer to stand, Brenda." Donald turned around slowly, his eyes cold. "Nicholas, we spent the morning evaluating Vanguard's strategic direction. It has become clear to leadership that you are no longer an organizational fit. Your hostile body language at the Atrium presentation and your persistent resistance to innovation have severely undermined company morale." I did not utter a single word during the Atrium assembly. "Donald," I stated evenly. "That is precisely the issue," Julian interjected, setting his tablet down. "You just stand there looming like a dark cloud, Nicholas. Every time I propose a cutting-edge technical solution, you project oppressive, rigid energy. We are building a culture of radical yes. We do not have room for bureaucratic gatekeepers." I turned my gaze to Julian, keeping my tone completely neutral. "Julian, you exfiltrated 6 terabytes of classified Department of Defense logistics data and transmitted it across an unencrypted public network. That is a direct violation of Title 18 United States Code. Section 1030, a breach of Title 18 United States Code Section 1831, and a catastrophic violation of our federal defense contracts." Donald struck Brenda's desk with a heavy palm. "Enough! This rigid paranoia is exactly why you are being severed. Julian is a visionary leader executing an essential strategy. You are an obsolete relic who sees crime in every forward-thinking initiative. So I am being terminated specifically for enforcing statutory compliance mandates explicitly required under our federal defense contracts?" I asked, articulating every word clearly for the record. "You are being severed for insubordination, creating a toxic work environment, and actively impeding corporate leadership," Brenda interjected smoothly, sliding the paper across the desk. "This is a standardized separation agreement. Vanguard is prepared to offer 3 weeks of discretionary severance pay, provided you immediately sign this mutual release and non-disparagement covenant." I looked down at the document. Offering 3 weeks of severance to a senior officer with 23 years of service was an insulting joke designed solely to gag me before I could alert external regulators. I will not be signing that agreement. Brenda, I said calmly. Donald let out a harsh laugh. Suit yourself, Nicholas. You walk out of this building with nothing. No severance, no bonus, and no reference. Surrender your security badge immediately. Security will escort you off the premises. I reached into my breast pocket, retrieved my security card, and placed it precisely on Brenda's desk. You are committing an irreparable executive blunder, Donald, I said quietly. It was a matter-of-fact diagnosis. The only blunder I committed was failing to fire you 3 years ago, Donald sneered. Now clear your personal belongings and get out. The walk through the main lobby was silent. A uniformed security officer named Thomas walked 3 paces behind me with his head lowered. When the heavy glass doors slid shut behind me, the humid Virginia air greeted my face. I walked across the concrete plaza to my sedan and sat in the quiet cabin. I retrieved my mobile device, opening the hardened communication application. A notification had arrived from Director Howard Albright. Termination confirmed. Security access revoked. You are officially designated a protected federal whistleblower under the Whistleblower Protection Act and Title 50 United States Code Authority. Stand down, remain at your primary residence, and do not attempt to contact corporate management. Federal strike elements are positioned. I started the engine and pulled out. Looking up toward the fourth-floor executive suite, I could see Julian standing by the window, gesturing wildly to subordinates. He genuinely believed he had eliminated his greatest obstacle. He failed to comprehend that I was never his enemy. I was the protective containment layer, keeping federal law from destroying his enterprise. The following morning at 10:45, I parked my sedan in the public overflow lot across the street from Vanguard Cyberdynamics. Rain trickled down my windshield. On the passenger seat beside me, a tablet displayed an encrypted compliance stream provided directly by Director Howard Albright's task force. A live video and audio feed from the fourth-floor executive boardroom. The boardroom looked like a staging area for a lavish celebration. Platters of high-end pastries were arranged on silver trays, a commercial espresso machine was installed in the corner, and the central mahogany table was draped in custom navy silk tablecloths. Donald Prescott paced near the head of the table, nervously adjusting his silk tie while rehearsing opening remarks. Julian Prescott stood beside an impressive 98-inch display monitor, connecting his laptop to the interface harness. Dad, the network throughput is absolute perfection, Julian bragged through ceiling microphones. The dynamic large language model is processing complex queries in milliseconds. I asked it to simulate a multi-node supply chain disruption across the Pacific Theater, and it returned a full predictive risk analysis in under 3 seconds. Do you know how long Nicholas Thorne's compliance team took to complete that exact analysis last quarter? Over 3 weeks. Nicholas belonged to an obsolete era, Donald replied, smoothing his lapels. You represent the future of defense contracting, son. Today we finalize the contract expansion that guarantees our dominance. At 11 o'clock sharp, the boardroom doors opened. General Jonathan Bradley stepped into the room. A formidable figure in full-service dress greens, flanked by 2 senior Pentagon procurement officers carrying locked leather briefing cases. Behind the military delegation, 2 sleek black government utility vehicles pulled into executive loading zones downstairs, blocking reserved executive parking spaces. 4 individuals emerged wearing Navy suits, led by Director Howard Albright. They moved through the lobby with predatory precision. The receptionist attempted to ask for identification, but Director Albright displayed a gold federal badge and judicial warrant. Agents secured elevator banks as the team ascended. In the boardroom, Julian launched his presentation. Gentlemen, Julian boomed, gesturing toward the 98-inch display. What you see before you is the Vanguard Artificial Intelligence Engine. It ingests raw classified operational data, satellite telemetry, and force readiness metrics, synthesizing them into immediate, tactical forecasts. General Bradley sat at the head of the mahogany table with an unreadable expression. He was not looking at dynamic charts on the screen. He was staring directly at Julian, with the cold disgust a seasoned combat commander reserves for a foolish child playing with an explosive. For example, Julian continued, tapping his keyboard, if I query the platform for critical infrastructure vulnerability across regional supply nodes, boom, the entire tactical map populates instantly. Dynamic red overlays illuminated power generation stations across the presentation screen. Is this processing environment hosted exclusively within Vanguard's certified air-gapped defense enclosure? A procurement officer asked flatly. Even better, Julian beamed. It is deployed across an elastic commercial hybrid cloud environment, ensuring maximum processing velocity and infinite global scalability. General Bradley raised an eyebrow. A commercial hybrid cloud? Meaning your system is actively connected to the open public internet? Precisely, Julian smiled arrogantly. We shattered outdated silos. Suddenly, the 98-inch screen flickered violently. The dynamic map froze, pixelated into static, and crashed into a red error screen. Network connectivity terminated. Remote host uneachable. Hardware interface isolated. Julian blinked in confusion, tapping keys frantically. One moment, General. Just a minor network latency issue. Our corporate Wi-Fi has been unstable today. Donald Prescott stepped forward to cover the pause. Minor technical gremlins, General. The classic hazard of live technical demonstrations. General Bradley did not smile. He slowly closed his briefing folder. At that exact second, every mobile device in the room emitted a harsh emergency override chime, followed by complete signal loss. What is happening? Donald demanded, pulling his smartphone out. My cellular reception dropped. Our internal network interface just went entirely offline. Julian panicked, his voice cracking. The gateway router is not responding. That is because federal technicians just severed your physical hardline connections at the street vault. A commanding voice announced from the doorway. Director Howard Albright stepped into the room, holding a judicial folder and his gold badge. He tossed the badge onto the table, where it slid across navy silk and stopped in front of Donald Prescott. The metallic thud reverberated through the silent room like a thunderclap. Who authorized this intrusion? Donald demanded, his face flushing crimson. This is a classified executive briefing. You cannot simply march into my corporate headquarters. I am Director Howard Albright of the National Security Agency. Director Albright stated calmly. And this is no longer a corporate briefing. This boardroom is now a secured federal crime scene under federal jurisdiction. Director Albright turned toward the hallway. Mr. Thorne, please step inside. I pushed open the heavy wooden doors and walked into the boardroom. I wore a sharp navy blue suit, white shirt, and dark silver tie, maintaining a disciplined, composed demeanor. The transformation on Donald Prescott's face was extraordinary. His jaw dropped, his eyes darted wildly, and color drained from his complexion. Nicholas? He whispered in disbelief. Hello, Donald, I said softly, standing before him as the physical embodiment of unyielding federal compliance. She sabotaged our network infrastructure. Julian shrieked, jumping out of his chair and pointing a shaking finger at me. Nicholas was bitter about being fired. He hacked our presentation server. Sit down immediately, one of the federal agents barked. Julian collapsed back into his chair. Mr. Thorne did not sabotage your enterprise, Julian. Director Albright stated, opening his judicial folder. Mr. Thorne executed his statutory duty under federal law by reporting your illegal system override to the National Security Agency. Because he took immediate action, our cyber defense units intercepted your unauthorized data feed before foreign intelligence actors fully extracted the information from the commercial server you utilized in Shanghai. Shanghai? Julian squeaked, his voice pitching into a high whine. Shanghai? We used a domestic startup in California. You executed a service agreement with a commercial startup whose primary cloud infrastructure is mirrored on servers located in Shanghai, I explained. Did you read their end-user licensing agreement and infrastructure architecture specs, Julian? You handed unredacted military operational logistics directly to foreign intelligence services. It was heavily encrypted, Julian stammered defensively. With a standard 256-bit key, I replied coldly. Foreign military supercomputers would decrypt that file structure in under 4 minutes. Fortunately, Director Albright interjected. Mr. Thorne alerted our task force 24 hours ago. We executed an immediate domain name system redirection. Your exfiltrated data stream never reached Shanghai. It was rerouted into an isolated federal sandbox server in Utah. We captured every packet of your transmission. The silence in the boardroom was absolute. Donald Prescott slumped into his executive chair, his formidable aura evaporating as federal criminal liability settled upon his shoulders. "Listen to me," Donald pleaded frantically. "This was an honest administrative misunderstanding. We can rectify this. We will permanently wipe the cloud servers. I will fire Julian right now." "Hey!" Julian yelled in betrayal. "It is far too late for administrative remedies, Donald," Director Albright stated. He pointed a remote control at the 98-inch display. The red error screen vanished, replaced by security footage recorded in our atrium the previous morning, capturing Donald and Julian boasting about overriding compliance firewalls, explicit verbal confirmation of executive intent to bypass security protocols, Director Albright noted. He displayed digital audit logs, and here we have digital proof that Chief Executive Officer Donald Prescott personally executed a master credential override to bypass hardware air gaps. That action constitutes direct participation in the unauthorized distribution of classified defense information under Title 18 United States Code Section 1831. "I am not a technical expert," Donald stammered, sweat glistening on his forehead. "I simply wanted to empower my son to innovate." "Ignorance of statutory law is no defense when you sign federal security agreements," General Bradley stated sternly. "Donald, do you comprehend statutory penalties for mishandling top-secret compartmented defense data?" "We can pay a regulatory civil fine," Donald offered frantically. "Vanguard maintains a $50 million legal indemnity policy." "This is not a civil dispute, Donald," I said. "You do not pay a fine for economic espionage and gross negligence with classified defense data. You served 20 years in a federal penitentiary." "Nicholas, please." Donald looked at me with wide, terrified eyes. "Help me explain this to federal authorities. Tell them it was simply an error in executive judgment." I looked down at him without malice or pity. "I told you, Donald. I told you in my initial audit report. I told you in my second risk assessment. And I explicitly warned you in Brenda's office yesterday afternoon. You told me I was creating a toxic work environment and terminated my employment. You terminated a protected federal whistleblower," Director Albright added, "which constitutes a severe violation of federal law. You have added federal felony retaliation charges to your indictments." At that moment, Board Chairman Charles Montgomery entered the room, pale with panic. "Donald, what in God's name is happening? The Securities and Exchange Commission just halted trading on our stock. The Pentagon Procurement Directorate has frozen our active contracts." General Bradley stepped forward. "Your chief executive officer and his son just attempted to stream active military logistics data across public commercial networks." Montgomery whirled around to face Donald Prescott, his eyes bulging with rage. "You did what? It was a complete technical misunderstanding," Donald cried. Montgomery glared at Julian and Donald. "You are fired, Donald," Montgomery declared, his voice shaking with furious authority. "Fired for cause, effective immediately. Your executive employment contract is voided, equity stock options revoked, and Vanguard will claw back every penny of executive compensation paid over the past 3 years." Montgomery turned frantically toward General Bradley. "General, please. Vanguard Cyberdynamics employs over 2,000 personnel. If the Department of Defense cancels our contracts, this firm will go bankrupt." "The primary defense contract is officially suspended pending a comprehensive federal security audit," General Bradley stated. "Our senior compliance officer was terminated yesterday." Montgomery cried. "Actually," Director Albright remarked, gesturing toward me, "Mr. Thorne is standing right here." Montgomery blinked in astonishment. "Nicholas?" "The officer whose compliance reports Donald suppressed." Mr. Thorne detected the initial breach, reported the violation through hardened federal channels, preserved physical cryptographic backup drives in Level 4 vaults, and prevented foreign intelligence services from obtaining military forecasts, Director Albright explained. "He is the sole reason Vanguard Cyberdynamics is not classified as a hostile corporate entity." Montgomery approached me immediately, grasping my hand. "Nicholas, I apologize unreservedly for former executive management. We need you back immediately. Name your terms, double your salary, triple your equity, complete executive authority. Just help us restore compliance. I looked at Director Albright, who offered a subtle nod. I have 3 non-negotiable conditions, Mr. Montgomery, I stated firmly. First, Donald Prescott and Julian Prescott are permanently banned from entering any corporate facility owned by Vanguard Cyberdynamics. Second, the senior cyber compliance officer reports directly to the board of directors, with absolute veto authority over technical operations, executive directives, and software deployments. If I state a server remains air-gapped, it stays air-gapped. Third, Director Walter Ellison shall receive a 40% salary increase and a promotion for attempting to resist Donald's illegal demands. Agreed, Montgomery declared without hesitation. You have absolute organizational authority. I turned toward General Bradley. General, if former management is removed and our original air gap protocols are restored, can Vanguard maintain its probationary defense status? General Bradley looked at me with deep respect. If you are personally signing statutory compliance certifications, Nicholas, then yes. The Department of Defense will allow Vanguard to operate under strict federal oversight. Thank you, General, I replied. I turned to Donald Prescott, who slumped blankly in his chair. You were correct about one thing, Donald, I said quietly. I am indeed a firewall, and you just destroyed your life trying to bypass me. Director Albright signaled his agents. Escort the subjects to the transport vehicles. Julian wept uncontrollably as heavy steel handcuffs were secured around his wrists. Dad, do something! Help me! Donald Prescott stood up slowly, looking suddenly frail and aged. He looked at Montgomery, who turned his back. He looked at General Bradley, who was reviewing federal documentation. He looked at me. I am sorry, Nicholas, Donald whispered. I know, Donald, I replied softly, but regret is not an entry in the audit log. Federal agents led Donald and Julian out of the boardroom toward waiting transport vehicles and federal holding cells. They would face federal prosecutors, grand jury indictments, and years in federal prison. The boardroom grew quiet once again. I walked over to the floor-to-ceiling windows and watched 2 black government vehicles pull out of the loading bay. I turned back, disconnected Julian's laptop, neatly coiled the interface wire, and took the elevator down to my department. Director Walter Ellison was waiting by the entrance and hurried to open the door. Nicholas, Walter gasped. Are Donald and Julian in federal custody? They are in federal custody, Walter, I replied smoothly. Please reactivate my master administrative credentials immediately, and ensure you never execute a verbal override for an uncleared executive again. Never, Walter promised fervently. I walked into my corner office, sat down at my terminal, and logged into the system. User N. Thorne. Access level, Executive Chief Compliance Officer. Status, unrestricted. I opened the Active Directory ledger, selected account System Admin 09, and typed account permanently terminated. Cryptographic keys revoked. I walked into the staff break room, filled the electric kettle, and prepared a steaming cup of Earl Grey tea. I took a slow, satisfying sip. It was hot, perfectly bitter, and absolute perfection. I returned to my desk and opened a clean, blank spreadsheet. I had an enterprise to rebuild. Real authority never needs to posture in corporate atrium assemblies. It simply operates according to unyielding law. Donald and Julian Prescott learned that executive privilege vanishes the moment it encounters the rigid wall of federal compliance. True authority is defined by integrity, duty, and statutory law. Thank you for listening to this narrative of corporate justice. If you appreciate stories where arrogant executive entitlement meets the unyielding wall of federal compliance, please hit the like button, subscribe to the channel, and share your thoughts in the comments below. See you in the next case file.